we do have a tendency to be tribal. You'll hear AA people bad-mouthing smart recovery, or NA bad-mouthing AA in that big book Fundamentalism, harm reduction bad-mouthing abstinence, and vice versa. That's human nature. We can't overcome it. But emotional sobriety is a way that we can sort of take what we learn in the world to, manage our own lives, and maybe a model that this kind of inclusive behavior, the yes and idea. Look, I'm not fighting the darkness. I'm just shining the light.
Bill Wilson, co-founder of Alcoholics Anonymous, wrote in 1952, "If we examine every disturbance we have, great or small, we will find at the root some unhealthy dependence and its consequent demand." Wilson suggested that if we could identify and continually surrender these unrealistic and unrealizable demands, that we may then be able to accomplish what he imagined to be the recovery's next frontier, something he called emotional sobriety. Flash forward 70 years and join psychotherapists and best-selling authors Tom Rutledge and Dr. Alan Berger, who have taken up the mantle of exploring Bill Wilson's new frontier. Welcome to Emotional Sobriety.
How you guys doing?
Well, I'm excited. We have a recurring guest on our show, and I'm really excited that Joe is joining.
And we're always very impressed with ourselves if someone will come back a second time. That doesn't happen always.
It doesn't happen. Nobody will take the invitation. Joe C is with us today, and it's great to have you, Joe. How are you doing today?
Fabulous. Nearly perfect is my favorite answer.
Oh my God, you're turning into Mary Poppins.
Mm-hmm.
What's her answer?
Practically perfect in every way.
Oh, exactly. Yeah, I like nearly perfect. And if people push me on it, I say I was born nearly perfect and there's been no improvement.
I like that, Joe. Oh, it's good to have you.
That's an optimistic statement.
It is an optimistic.
There's no improvement.
Yeah, it is an optimist. They're up in Canada are a lot more optimistic than we are.
Well, they're Canadian. They have more reason to be.
I saw a friend of mine from New Jersey showed me her new hat. It was a red ball cap, and it said in white letters on the top, "Canada is already great."
I love
it. Oh, that's wonderful.
We would never talk that way. But I got
too humble up there. You guys are too humble up there. How are you today, Patrick?
Oh, I'm good. It's been a great weekend. There's a friend of mine who is a filmmaker who came to my house in the high desert to shoot the majority of this feature film towards the end of last year. And then he came back for pickups this weekend. And so yesterday, we rented a flatbed truck from Home Depot to do these shots, and we were out kind of getting time-lapse photography, out in the desert with all the succulents and whatnot. And anyway, it was I love filmmaking, and I don't have visitors very often out here in person, so it was just a nice opportunity to catch up and do some creative bullshitting. So it's good.
It shows in your eyes. I love. That's one of the things that's really cool. It's like when people talk about something they truly love, they have a passion for, they just light up. It doesn't. I mean, you could be going through the worst thing in the world. You're talking to somebody in deep grief, and if somehow we segue into a subject about something they love as much as Patrick loves that, it's like it's so good to see the joy in people's faces.
Yeah. And, no kidding. Every Sunday when I wake up and I get to do this with you guys, that lights me up too, because, this goes right to the core of all the shit that's really important to me. So thanks for being here with me, guys.
Right with you.
How are you today, Tom? How you doing?
I'm good. Weather's turned to better here. So I've been, I'm always outside with my dog Lucas, whether it's hot or not, but it's been very nice. It's been pleasant weather outside. So we've been hanging out, and I had on Friday I have Zoom clients when I do remote stuff, but I have some clients that are phone clients, and phone clients I get to sit outside. And I may have told this on here before, but one day Dee was sitting around in the evening and she said, "You look sunburned." I go like, "Yeah, I had 3 clients today." It's like
great. That's great.
My dad, I always just use my dad's line, which is I have no complaints that would hold up in court.
Yeah, I'm having a good day too. I started out, we had our garage remodeled. It's like it's my second man cave, right?
Wow.
And now I get to organize it. I get to put the paint on one shelf, and I get to put paintbrushes on another shelf, and the cleaning stuff on another shelf. And I've just been in heaven all morning.
Well, since Patrick and I have seen the before, send us some pictures of what it's looking like now, because it's a big wonderful garage, but it was just a garage when we saw it.
Yeah, now it's a garage with new cabinets in it, and they got these cool things. I forgot what they're called now, but you hang hooks on them, and you can configure them all different kinds. Go and hang tools and stuff. I'm just having a lot of fun designing this garage and laying it out the way I want it. And look, because what happens is I go out, I look for something, I can't find it, and I buy it, at the hardware store. Right. So I've got 25 screwdrivers, I've got 6 hammers, and now I know I have 6 hammers. I don't have to go to the garage. This garage is going to save me money. I just see it in my view.
I love it. And we've seen the joy in Allen's eyes.
Yeah, and I'll co-sign that bullshit for you. If you need rationalization support, please. I'm sure it'll save you money.
Please, Joe, it'll save me a lot of money. And I'll tell you, it's not inexpensive to have them come in and do this. Philadelphia Garage did it. They did a remarkable job. They went above and beyond. But I'll tell you, comparatively so, when I looked at the prices, when I was going to do that to my garage in California, half the cost. Yeah. Half the cost out here on the East Coast. It's amazing to me. So I feel like I've got a steal. I mean, it's so relative, man. I'll tell you, that stuff in LA is so expensive. So it's $25,000 to do your garage in LA. And I got it for almost a third of that. So I'm really excited. So it's great. But look, I'm really excited too about today. Always good to see you, Joe. Rock and roll.
I know. I've been looking forward to this. I love podcasts. I think it's one of the great things about 21st century recovery and wellness. I'm a big consumer of them. It's just, you can listen anytime while you're doing something else, or just focus on it completely, listen twice.
Well, we're getting that feedback. People just throw us on when they're in their car and they find a show they like. They've listened to it a few times. We had a wonderful guest on last week, Gina, who's an anxiety coach. And, she talks about that, and she has the same experience we do. And I'm sure you do. People find a show that's meaningful, man. They'll listen to it several times.
I remember I was going to podcast camps in the early 2000s, like 2005, 2006. And the only podcasts were about podcasting.
That's right. I remember a bunch of them came out at that point, right?
Yeah.
How to start your own podcast, how to organize your podcast.
It's like the guys who write the Get Rich Quick books. Well, how do they get rich? By writing a Get Rich Quick book. It's like Tom Robbins, the novelist, says they're the only people who get rich from those books.
I was going to say something stupid, which is I had the image of the snake swallowing its tail, but but I wanted Joe to just explain for our listeners who may not be familiar, like a bit about his show and some of the work you do in recovery, just to get it started.
Yeah, I do a show called Rebellion Dogs Radio. I got started in podcasting and doing independent music in Toronto and in Canada. And then I could just see how this really made sense for sort of recovery community sort of consumption. Like, I mean, when people arrive at treatment for the first time, how many TED Talks have they seen? How many podcasts have they listened to? It's so easy to lurk, to just sort of be sober curious and check it out a little bit. While we were talking about our days today, I was wondering how someone sober curious would be listening, right? Rock and roll. Wow, you building a garage, and you get to sit outside when you're, in the ball of chain of work. Lucky you. Like I could see myself just because when I was introduced to recovery, hey, this is recovery. it's peace and quiet, it's calm. I was young, and I just wanted, tell me there's going to be adventure, tell me there's going to be a little bit of danger, a little bit of excitement. But I crave different things than I did when I was that young person. But it's a great way for people to do their own research about recovery lifestyle. So I started one called Rebellion Dogs Publishing because I got a hint earlier we might be talking about a book, but when I published a book, before that I had this podcast in support of just some of the research I was doing, things that I knew would be interesting to a very small group of nerdy people, like underrepresented populations in the recovery community, atheists and agnostics, or BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, people of color, just where the science meets the art of recovery, and how the critics just love to sort of shit all over, well, that's not evidence-based, equine therapy, ha 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 ha. But when I started, that was true, but there's been so much research on so many things that it's I mean, the jury is out, and peer-to-peer recovery works. There's still mystery in it. We don't know exactly why. There's still things to be discovered. How do you end every paper? You people who write papers, more research needed, just while you're writing your next grant, But so I was really interested in taking those ideas that the academics were writing and do it in plain language after the meeting coffee talk. Right. Just sort of, so often I have to interview them to just sort of get it down into plain language and make sure I understood it correctly, or as well as I could for a layperson. I've never tried to be an expert, because I don't think there are any experts, but we all have experience. And so I wanted to share some of my experience with some, research I did in archives. And that wouldn't have sounded very rock and roll to me when I was new. And, that kind of stuff.
But, I wanted to say something about what you were saying earlier about, the sober curious and listening. And when you come in the program, am I going to be mellow? I think the one gift of emotional sobriety is that we now become more alive. That's the way that I mean, you hear that all of us are people living their lives and enjoying their lives. Doesn't mean it's easy all the time. Doesn't mean that we don't have our moments of doubt and pain and depression, anxiety, all that stuff that happens. But we got some tools now to kind of deal with that, to deal with that stuff, and to really find a way to show up in life that works for us. And that's the exciting thing about emotional sobriety for me, because I see that happening all the time. And we hear it in the Thursday night meeting that we have, people talking about that all the time. But look, I wanted to mention your book, Beyond Belief, right? Agnostic's Musings for a 12-Step Life. I mean, this is a wonderful, I've told you at the beginning of the show today, I've adopted it as my new 24-hour-a-day book. And you break it down into a thought for each day. Tell us about this in terms of what your inspiration was to write this.
Okay, I didn't want to write it. I wanted to buy it. I thought it must already be there, right? I went shopping for a daily reflection book that wasn't a religious devotional. Most of them, they have this interesting idea, and then they sort of lose me with the, sort of prayer and describing God and things that just, I go, I no longer felt included in the conversation. I thought, this isn't doing it for me. And, you can separate the pepper from the fly shit and find some good in all of the readings everywhere. Absolutely. But I knew that there must be a growing demand for a secular approach to, sort of daily reflection and sort of recovery routine. So I went looking for this book. I couldn't find it. And I complained to my friends, and they were very kind and listened to me complain over and over again about how can there not be in the 20th century? What's wrong with people? Mm-hmm. And someone said, challenge me. Okay, Joe, describe the type of person that would have written this book. Would they be someone who maybe is already a writer? Maybe someone who's been clean and sober a while? Someone like you? And I said, well, I can't do it because, and I just started the sentence thinking for sure I'll have an end of the sentence when I get to the middle. And
you didn't.
I stopped. I said, I'll tell you what, I'll try. I'll get, because I had ideas, right? And I broke it down. Like, it just, for someone who's ADHD, it's just 365 things I've got to keep all organized, So I had some quotes I loved. I had some expressions I'd heard in the rooms that were my favorite. I broke it down to, at the time, it's 10 years old now, so I was over 35 years clean and sober. I thought, okay, so what's the 10 best ideas I've heard every year of my recovery, right? And so I sort of organized it that way, a little bit about early recovery, a little bit about, the existential angst of living, and all kinds of stuff. And I had no idea what the audience was. And I learned this from my indie artist friends. They wrote their music for themselves, right? If 100 people liked it or 1 million people liked it, that wasn't going to be their influence. They're going to write the record they don't have in their record collection. What's missing in my record collection? I need a record that does this, talks about this with this kind of sound. Okay, that's what I'm going to make. And that is the book I wrote. And when I got to 200, I thought, I'm going to tap out. I'm never going to make it to 365. And when I got to 300, I wish there was 500 days in the year, because I had over 500, and I had to sort of cut it down to the ones that were cohesive and sort of fit together, and take out some of the ones that seemed to be repetitive. And so it was a process of doing something, like incorporating like a lot of your emotional sobriety skills, right? Like creative problem solving, like how am I going to do this with my limited skill set? And what am I going to draw upon? So like, what do I know? Like, I know music. So I have quotes from Stoics and 12-step literature, and some of the popular tastemakers today, and some of the popular tastemakers through the years, like the old books I've read about transactional analysis. I'm not a professional, but I love that stuff, and I could totally see how in any AA meeting you can see people getting triggered by these things, right? That it's one of those lenses you can look through. And like it was, I'm someone called me an autodidact, and I didn't know what that word meant. Yeah. And it means a self-taught, somebody who's their degree is in the school of life.
Well, look at the feedback you've got on this. You really achieved that inclusiveness. I mean,
well, at first it was a little bit edgy. It was a little bit reactive to the fact that I felt sometimes discounted in meetings about my lack of a belief in a supernatural force, where people would say, I'm praying for you, Joe, ha, 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 or you'll get it eventually. Like somehow having a natural worldview versus a supernatural worldview is an intellectual holdout. It's not. It's just, it's a core belief, and it's how you see the world. And are there atheists in foxholes? Yes, they're the ones returning fire while you're on your knees praying. right? So
That's awesome.
we're everywhere. And I also wanted to give the impression that I'm not a one-off. I'm not a novelty, right? This is a legitimate way of finding recovery, keeping recovery. And,
well, listen. I just want to read a couple of the endorsements on the back of your book. It says, while reading these pages, I did not feel that I had to filter out any ideas that were not acceptable to my own spiritual truths. Mm-hmm. Right. So that's an interesting point about your natural view versus a religious view. That doesn't mean it's not spiritual.
Well, if you like to use that word.
Yes.
And I know what people mean when they use that word, for sure. And I don't find it offensive, or I don't find it's trying to control me. Some people do, though. Some people find that word, it's a bait and switch word, right? Yeah.
They're sneaking it in. They're sneaking God into it, right? That's the thing.
Exactly. But editors are so helpful, right? You need to learn to be teachable, to be editable. And you'll see two editor names on there. I had one editor who was in recovery and a Sunday school teacher. Another editor that was an absolute black and white atheist. Like, what is this spiritual they're talking about? I have no idea. Do they mean feelings? I know what feelings are, but I don't know if I've had a spiritual experience, none that I would recognize. Why are they talking woo-woo? Right. Mm-hmm. And so it had to go past both of these editors' desks to make it into the book. And if it couldn't satisfy both, it got scrapped and rewritten or because I don't even know when my biases are coming through. Right. Like, we all have these biases under under the surface, and sometimes I'm being passive aggressive, and so it really takes that editing process to sort of challenge that. Ernie Kurtz, who we lost in 2015, but he became a bit of a mentor in the sort of late stages. He didn't like the title because he thought agnostic left him out, because he's as well as having a Harvard PhD in history, in American history, he's also a Jesuit, right? So he found that there was nothing that sort of attacked his personal views, and that maybe it should be called something like Beyond Belief: Contemporary Musings for 12-Step Life. And honestly, I was ambivalent. I didn't know which way to go, but I really wanted to make sure that people who felt like I did, excluded from the party, knew that this book was for them. Someone who considered themselves a free thinker, an atheist, an agnostic, that this is a book that wasn't the sort of bait and switch of chapter 4 in the book Alcoholics Anonymous, where, we who were agnostics and once felt like you did. When the reality is, you read Pew Research and they track people, and people change their worldview. They go from one religion to another. They go from no religion to some religion. They go from being a preacher to being an atheist. Right? Anybody can change who has a seeker's mind, right?
Tell everybody who Ernie Kurtz is, because he's...
Ernie Kurtz wrote a couple of books that a lot of people know. Not God, History of Alcoholics Anonymous. And that book was...
Incredible book, right? Incredible.
It was his doctoral thesis.
Yes.
For American history. So he was talking about Alcoholics Anonymous in the context of when it happened and where it happened, and someone probably from Hazelden said, Ernie, a lot of people would really like this in book form.
Yeah, that's Sid Farrar who did that. I know Sid from Hazelden.
Yeah, that's exactly.
Sid went to Ernie and said, "Look, man, we gotta get this book published. This is and it is. I mean, he really captures, I think, some of the nuances in terms of what was going on that nobody else captured in terms of the process.
He was the first person ever to be given restricted access to AA archives to read the letters that Bill Wilson had written and had received, and all of this history. And he didn't like Bill Wilson at first. His politics was different than this guy, and he wanted to dislike him, but he described Bill Wilson as someone who could hear what wasn't said in a person's letter and respond to that. And like, he just developed this heartfelt respect for the guy, and continued to feel that way till he passed away in 2015. But he went on to write a couple other seminal books for us with Catherine Ketchum, who is, she co-wrote Under the Influence. I'm sure you read that in the 80s. And then Beyond, I think Beyond the Influence or something. She's co-wrote in a lot of books, but together with Ernie Kurtz, they wrote The Spirituality of Imperfection.
Another great book.
Don't you wish you'd thought up that title? Like, what a title, like bing, you know, it's over. 10.0. That's a great title. And then 20 years later, they wrote Experiencing Spirituality, a follow-up to that, which is also just as good, right? And those are books that are timeless, right?
They are. They got, as Sid told me, they've got good legs. They're going to be standing up for a long time.
Yeah, for sure.
Strong legs.
Yeah. And he's written about guilt and shame and some other things.
Your book is quite complimentary. You know, you could tell at first exactly what you were saying. He was looking at it a little skeptically, and then all of a sudden he saw the value in terms of what you were bringing. So please, if you're out there listening to our show, pick up Joe's book. It's really outstanding.
You know, in the emotional sobriety meetings, I've noticed a couple times, because it's not specifically designed to be a more secular framework, but it does kind of, like, I think, end up on the more secular side of the spectrum. And there are some more spiritual participants who feel underrepresented because there's not as much God or spiritual stuff in the language. And I think, you know, the recovery that most appeals to me is the one that excludes as few people as possible. But then again, it's a big tent. So, like, I think that maybe you could just speak to that delicate balancing act when working with people. And you know, I'm fairly secular atheist. You know, I respond very positively to, you know, the kind of things that you were just talking about. But you know, I also love my brothers and sisters in the program who you know, who pray, and you know, they ask me to pray. I don't usually do it, but you know. Yeah. What do you think?
But you don't get out your cell phone and check your messages. You respectfully.
I just want to pile on to the question too, because I just, you know, the thing in all of this stuff that is at least I'm speaking for myself personally, is potentially offensive to me, is always exclusion. Not the belief, because we choose beliefs. It's like we can, like you said, we can change those beliefs. I had a wonderful friend that used to just say belief is a choice. You don't have to prove it beyond any kind of reasonable doubt to anybody else. You don't have to make it an objective reality. You could choose whatever you want to believe, but it's the exclusion that becomes the problem. And I think that's what you're saying, Patrick. Yeah.
I'm also very curious. I don't know if anyone's read any of the work that Ernest Becker has done about terror management theory. It's why nations fight against each other. It's why religions clash with each other. And it's basically his theory that's been corroborated by people since he's died with this sort of terror management theory stuff. But it's that as human beings, we're the only earthlings that can think about the future and know we're going to die. Like, our dog isn't worried about being dead and will they be well remembered. You know, other animals, as far as we know, they don't think about these things, but humans do. And we have an ego, and the existential terror of the fact that we are finite and we won't last forever is untenable to our delicate ego. So we create these immortality projects. We have children to create a legacy. We start a group to create a legacy. We build a business and a career to build a legacy. We write a song to make a legacy. These are all attempts to avoid the reality that we're going to die and we will be forgotten, not in the first 10 years, but in the first 10,000. We will be completely forgotten about, right? And because we have that, we create these constructs like community, religion, nationhood, all that sort of thing. And it helps us overcome that anxiety because it makes us feel we're part of something that will last forever. And that's great until we come up against somebody else who has a completely different worldview, who says, you believe blah, blah, blah. That's not how God works. That's silly.
Mm-hmm.
And then eventually they do believe that's how God works. And they keep talking that way. Why won't they? I told them it's this way. And then you get angry at them. Hopefully eventually, some German philosopher said all truth goes through three stages. First, it's ridiculed, then it's violently opposed, then it's accepted as obvious.
Well, I love the depersonalizing aspect of what Allen teaches because, I think when I first started recovery and, got some time and was in rehab and initially kind of rebelled against religious language and all the stuff that mattered less to me as I went on, because I realized, I don't necessarily need to make this thing my DNA in order to draw some energy from it and make my own meaning out of the material.
Yeah. Well, here's a story of something which happened recently. We do have a tendency to be tribal. You'll hear AA people bad-mouthing smart recovery, or NA bad-mouthing AA in that big book Fundamentalism, harm reduction bad-mouthing abstinence, and vice versa. That's human nature. We can't overcome it. But emotional sobriety is a way that we can sort of take what we learn in the world to, manage our own lives, and maybe a model that this kind of inclusive behavior, the yes and idea. Look, I'm not fighting the darkness. I'm just shining the light. Right. I got no qualms. I just, yes and, not either or.
No, it's the inclusion. That's I never. Thank you, Joe. I never thought about that in terms of what we're doing with the emotion through the emotional sobriety lens. But that's exactly it. It's like we're not pitting ourselves against anybody. Even there's not even an implication of that.
That's right.
So that's beautiful. Yeah. Hey, Allen, we're doing something right.
Yeah, listen. I was the thought for today. Joe ends September 18th by saying, "Comparing or competing is folly." He goes, "I will never be putting apples up against apples. So what's the point? Do I think I am different? I win. I am right and tied for first place. We are all unique. I can identify with others, but I need not judge myself or others harshly." There it is.
That wasn't bad. I heard you say that on a podcast.
When you read, I know when people read my stuff, I go, "Who wrote that?" I know. Jesus Christ, that guy was pretty smart. I don't remember it.
Whatever. Yeah, there's so many things we've written that are smarter than we are. It's like I don't know what some part of my brain can do that. I guess. Yeah.
That's a great segue into what one of the things I was hoping we could do today, Joe. When you and I were doing those free thinker workshops on emotional sobriety, you came in one day and blew my mind. You read an excerpt from a Dr. Seuss book that captured the spirit of emotional sobriety, and I wonder if you'd be willing to do that today.
Yeah, I would be happy to. Sometimes free thinkers, non-theists, tend to be a little intellectual, right? and pretty proud of themselves a little bit, right? and sometimes you got to bring it down to earth.
Right. So a children's book is a great way to do that, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. That the greatest things in life can be said easily. So this is from The Places You'll Go by Dr. Seuss. And doesn't this just cover what we're talking about? You'll get mixed up, of course, as you already know. You'll get mixed up with many strange birds as you go. So be sure when you step with care and great tact, and remember that life is a great balancing act. Just never forget to be dexterous and deft, and never mix up your right foot from your left. And you will succeed. Yes, you will indeed. 98.75% guaranteed.
I love it.
I love it, man. It really captures a lot of the essence, right? Look, learning to roll with the punches, man, is to me such an important part of emotional sobriety and finding that balance, right?
And the other thing about emotional sobriety is understanding I'm not going to transcend my own humanity, right? I haven't found a panacea that will protect me from grief and suffering and embarrassment, right? I'm still going to stick my foot in my mouth. I'm still going to hurt the people I love. And I'm still going to underperform at times, right? And it, just living in reality is accepting the limits of my own humanity. Right. I can grow and I can learn and I can improve. It's not an excuse, but the other people I'm dealing with are that way. And if I'm easy on myself, if I can give myself a break, I'm not so judgy about you three either.
Right.
And
exactly.
And when I'm being super judgy about me, I'm being super judgy about you. And if I'm taking it easy on myself, I make space for other people and their foibles too.
This reminds me that I've thought for a while that there should be an alternate to amen, because I always, when you say stuff like that, amen. But I think that coming from the 60s and 70s where I grew up, it's like, it's no shit, dude. It's like we should, and I guess what the congregation should be able to say after something as wise as what you just said is no shit, dude. That's perfect. That is just on point.
It's so on point. I mean, we've been now going back through the steps on Thursday night, Joe, and this time we're going through from the lens of how does working the 12 steps impact our self-esteem, our self-concept. And we've spent 6 shows on or 6 Thursday nights on step 1. And the whole gist of that was the importance of self-acceptance.
Yep.
And how self-acceptance becomes a prerequisite to any change.
Yeah.
It's not going to happen. You're not going to change anything until you accept it. And Dr. Nathaniel Branden has this great line: self-esteem is the utter refusal to have an adversarial relationship with yourself.
Yeah.
And it ties into just exactly what you're saying.
Yeah, you're missing your own life. If I don't accept my life as it is and me as it is, I'm missing the show. I'm out in the foyer.
Well, and what you were saying, right? Where we used to live, yeah. It's like, but what you just said prior is such, goes right to what, Allen, you're talking about. Is it's the ripple effect of self-acceptance. Yes. It's like because that's what Joe said very naturally. It's like, I mean, he just, the simplest version of it was, as he practiced self-acceptance for himself, the 3 of us were less judged by him. It's like, and that's where it begins. It's like, we just don't have the need for judging others when we have the acceptance for ourselves.
What he would have been thinking about us if he didn't have that? My God, what would I'm not even going to ask you, Joe.
Well, let me just tell you a little story of how I sort of struggled with that this week, right? In the world of 12-step organizations ought never be organized, and people interpret a lot, right? And people are in positions of trust. They're trustees of the groups, and they feel like they rule them. They feel like they have to vet them. They feel like they have to oversee them. And that's just a mistaken identity, or at least people can do what they want, of course, if it's agreed upon, but it's not how it was laid out for us anyway. So sometimes we get problems with, well, that's not AA. Well, you can't have AA without God. That's not AA. Or you can't have AA and read that non-conference approved literature or whatever else. So from time to time, special purpose groups have had troubles with intergroups or, sort of central offices about, we're not going to list your meeting anymore because someone said they went to your meeting and you did this and we disapprove, right? Yes. Imagine, if you will, one alcoholic judging another. So my own group was delisted from the Toronto intergroup meeting list. I knew it was coming up. I went to the meeting. I thought they would never do it. Like getting sober young, people have always put up with my sort of envelope pushing type of stuff. Yeah. Okay, Joe, right? There's still going to be a seat for you, right? And this was the pain I went through of being rejected by AA or feeling like I'd been rejected, when the reality was the General Service Office hadn't rejected us. The district hadn't even rejected us. We just weren't included in the most recent printing of a paper pamphlet, which who uses that now that you can look up meetings on the internet, right? So, right. We got our own website and people could find us. But anyway, I was hurt by that. And we see this happening again. And another group, which will be not identified, and another intergroup, which there's no need to identify because these problems are happening everywhere. So it's ubiquitous. But was told you can't read that book. Like, let's say they were reading Emotional Sobriety, right? And they were reading another book about the 12 steps, and that's not conference approved. So we're taking you off the list. We're not including you. And when I was told about this, it just brought me back to that sort of, sort of re-traumatizing that I started crafting a letter to their intergroup chair. And it was really wise. Like, I was quoting Bill and showing them how they were so wrong and how what Bill intended was this, and this is what he said. Like, I was preparing for court. Right. And I was treating this relationship with me and this person I didn't know as a zero-sum game. Who's going to win? Who's going to lose? And that's not how it works in life. That's not how it works in AA. We need to resolve a problem where everybody is satisfied. We need, sort of substantial unanimity. And I backed up from that, and I wrote in the letter, I understand you're going through this little bit of a kerfuffle. I've been through it too. Our intergroup went through this. There were a lot of unintended consequences, a lot of hard feelings. It took us a long time to heal. If you want to talk, I can tell you what my experiences were with it. Here's a couple of things I've read from Bill Wilson's Concept 12, Warranty 6, and something about general service about non-conference approved literature that you might find helpful. But I've been there. I'd love to talk if you'd like. I didn't hear back, but I heard the problem was resolved. Right. And I don't think I tilted the scales, but I certainly wouldn't have helped by accusing them of being discriminatory.
Yeah, that's right. Rigid. Yeah, biased. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. I tell you, as a writer, though, Joe, I got to tell you, I used to write letters like that all the time, and I loved writing letters like that because I just was so fucking mad. And it's like I just loved to do that. And it was like when I started to get better, and I would write. I still write I can still do it today. I mean, it's like I can write the letter. It's like letting it go. Just talk about ego. Just as a writer is hard. It's like God. There's some sentences in there that I absolutely love. I've got to, and I'm gonna erase the whole damn thing and write a three line an email to these people instead, you know, exactly. And it's like, but it's beautiful, but talk about self-esteem, Allen, but it certainly feeds my self-esteem because I realize I'm making the choice to be the better version of myself.
And sometimes when we act without thinking, on impulse, on our initial gut feeling, sometimes we're right. But sometimes our goal is to help, and we're going to make things worse.
Well, we can be right, and still that's not the way to approach it. That's what I've learned. I look back at times where I've taken stands, and I could never hold a job when I was. That's why I've spent 40 something years in a room by myself with people coming by to visit for a living. But I was either fired or I would just get pissed off and storm out. And I look back at that stuff, and it's like I could have handled every damn one of those things better. You know, I understand that now, but very seldom do I find that I disagree, even at my age now, disagree with the premise that, you know, it's like, no, I was mad about something that I think I would still be mad about, or I would disagree with something I still disagree about. It's just how I handled it.
Yeah. Candor without malice.
Yeah. Yes. Oh, God. Malice was magic. Lots of malice. Yeah. Give me that with extra malice.
So a good takeaway today is this: emotional sobriety is embracing our humanity and all that we are. And you know, it's so interesting. You know, I'm a Gestalt therapist, as you know from our other discussions, and you know, one of the things Fritz Perls said that I've always loved and that really endeared me to his philosophy was that mental health is a coordination, an appropriate balance and coordination of all of what we are.
All of what we are.
Of all of what we are. I mean, I love that. When I heard that, I said, I'm home. It really was that feeling like, my God, there's room for me. There's room for me. It's that inclusiveness you talked about, Joe. And that's what self-acceptance does, is we gets us to that place. And it's then very hard for me to judge other people that are making mistakes, because when I accept myself, I see that I am a flawed being too.
Right.
I make mistakes. I get angry. I do stupid stuff. You know, I tell everybody I'm a lot smarter now that I realize how stupid I am.
Yeah.
I mean, it worked that way for me.
That's where empathy is just such a great tool, right? You know,
such a great tool, man.
Let me put myself in this intergroup chair's position.
Well, that's what you did.
Someone complaining and someone defending, and they didn't invite this conflict upon themselves, right?
So here's an idea that I want to just throw out, and we'll wrap up today's show. I mean, once again, it's always such a delight to have you here, Joe. Thank you so much for taking the time. But what do you guys think about next summer? Why don't we do an emotional sobriety celebration of a couple days, maybe over a Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday? Invite you down to join us here in Pennsylvania. Get Tom down here, Patrick. We'll have a stage. We'll build a stage in my backyard. We'll have some music. We'll have some people sharing. People can bring lawn chairs. We'll have a barbecue out. There's a pool people can jump into. We'll have a good old time.
I'm in. I am in like gin.
All right. So tune that guitar up.
Yeah.
Yep.
I'll never turn that opportunity down.
Yeah. Well, let's see if we can create a little, conference or whatever it is, and have people come out for an emotional sobriety celebration.
Well, it's not like you haven't created like things like that before, Allen.
No, we did that with the Evolution Conference, right?
Buddy, you are a manifester.
Let's do it, guys. I think we got the thing, and I'd love to, integrate it with music, poetry, and sharing.
Beautiful.
Sounds like a plan. And I don't want to let the day pass without mentioning our event with Joe on October 29th, Saturday coming up. We're going to be doing, well, can you describe a little bit, Joe, about like the nature of the event?
This is the International Conference of Secular AA. It has been, informally, there's always been a We Agnostics panel at the AA World Convention since 1990. But this is, again, like young people's conferences or lawyers in AA or women's conference, this is everybody's welcome, but it's put on by atheists and agnostics in AA. And the first one was in Santa Monica in 2014. And
I was at that one, Joe. I was at that. That was great.
Yeah, that was pretty cool, eh? Did you meet Catherine Ketchum there?
Yes, I did meet Catherine, and I did a workshop on emotional sobriety. It was the first time I went into that group.
Yeah. That was such a game changer for so many people. For instance, here's I'll quickly tell the story and then get back to what Patrick asked. I was in a meeting where people were just sharing, and there was about 50 people in this room, and someone said, "It's hard, I just bite my tongue because I'm the only atheist in all of Arizona." And then someone said, "Me too." And someone else said, "Me too, me too." And they all stood up, and some of them knew each other. It's just because they were closeted about their worldview, they didn't know, right? And within a year, there were 10 or 12, agnostic, atheist, free thinker type meetings there. It was a real game changer. So we're doing this year's edition. We were going to be in Washington, D.C. The first one was Santa Monica. We've been to Austin, Texas, Toronto. Washington got canceled in 2020 and or replaced with virtual. And it was going to happen again this year, and we canceled it again because of the current status of COVID. So it's going to be virtual, and it's free. It's 2 days on Zoom. If anyone's interested, aasecular.org for more information. And Emotional Sobriety is doing a live podcast. So instead of just, for anyone who wanted to be a fly in the room, you can be there. They're going to do this podcast with a Zoom audience and include some time for some feedback. You could just start talking, you guys, right? Yeah.
That's why I'm here. It's like I don't have to have anything to say to start talking. No.
It's going to be off the hook. It's going to be fantastic.
And thank you for including us in that, Joe. We're all excited about that that light in the eye thing I talked about earlier. We all have it about being able to do this, and I love getting to know you.
Take care, Joe.
Change your life, change your myth, cultivate your narrative with whomever you're with. Then with glass in hand and children on one knee, bring some stories, bring your stories back to me. It ain't a crime to be a human. Never be ashamed to be yourself. Rest assured that whatever you're doing will entertain me like nobody else. So here's to us, my old friends, until it's time to drink the wine and break the bread again. With glass in hand and children on one knee, bring some stories, bring your stories back to me.